unveils, as it is known, that was very much rooted in the country's intellectual discourse, emerging language-based movements, which were considered to be separatist as far as the approach of the central government, that means the federation, is concerned. Third world states do not allow the foreign-funded NGOs to expand their space in these countries, and that's it. That doesn't mean this applies only to Pakistan. For example, in India and very many other countries, social media now, it has tremendous power in shaping and making people's opinions. And those who control power also know the power of the media, and that's how they've been trying to control media. The Hindus in Pakistan, Christians in Pakistan, and lesser minorities, they have been subjected to what I have termed as minoritization of communities. The minorities, their representatives, they are not serving the purpose of serving their constituency, which means the religious minorities. During all this period, when this kind of authoritarian rule through elections, that means the establishmentarian democracy continued to operate, there was a kind of narrative which was developed. That narrative is based fundamentally on conflict. There is, for example, the India syndrome. From partition onwards, we developed the new other in the form of Hindu India next door. The clash of civilizations, as it is known, that was very much rooted in the country's intellectual discourse. For example, there is a mini clash of civilization in the region between the Hindu and Islamic civilizations. Yes, there has been an anti-Western, anti-Hindu, anti-Zionist narrative in the new country. Within the country, there has been a battle of cultures, as I mentioned, the culture of the dominant elite and the culture of those who tend to identify themselves with their geography, like in Sindh, like in Pashtun areas, like in Balochistan and earlier Bengal, and language. That's why we saw there emerging language-based movements, which were considered to be separatist as far as the approach of the central government, that means the federation, is concerned. So here we have something to say about the civil society out there, away from the state. What was happening? Quite a bit of civil society activities controlled by the NGOs in Pakistan. So homegrown civil societies known less than the civil society which is financed and to some extent controlled by the donor community based in the West. So this particular kind of civil society is reformist in various ways about, for example, human rights, child rights, women's rights, and so on. On the other hand, it is politically status quo oriented because, first of all, third world states do not allow the foreign funded NGOs to expand their space in these countries, and that's it. That doesn't mean this applies only to Pakistan. For example, in India and very many other countries, this has been happening. So that means that there is no scope for the civil society to engage itself with the masses, which is very much a function of politics. So there is no route through the civil society to democracy. And again, I've talked about education, and I think that the education, particularly in the kind of textbooks for the schools and colleges, education has not served this purpose of enriching the minds of the youth. It has heavily depended on ideology and on morality. And that means there is a deficit of the scientific temper. That again means that most of the social sciences which are taught in this country are heavily ideologized and circumscribed in a certain way, not fulfilling the purpose of the education in general and higher education in particular. And that means again that there is a deficit of civic sense. People tend to believe in things in a subjective mode of understanding. Objectivity, the scientific method, looking at things the way they are instead of looking at them the way they should be, that has been the dominant pattern in terms of education in Pakistan. And in terms of media, again, I've talked about it along with education and civil society as part of the mass public. So media is in a way consumed by adversarial idiom, us and them, the dichotomous pattern of thinking, not only in a global context, not only in a regional context, but also within the country in terms of parties opposing each other, the religious parties opposing the so-called modern parties, and it continues downwards to the constituency level, where this adversarial approach takes sometimes a violent turn in the context of a non-combative show of power in the form of elections. So this media, which has moved on towards social media now, it has tremendous power in shaping and making people's opinions. And those who control power also know the power of the media, and that's how they've been trying to control media. You must have heard about a lot of laws, Papa fair trial at Pika in 2016 under Nawaz Sharif, Pipa ordinance issued under Imran Khan, and of course again there has been legislation passed by the Punjab Assembly where there is a kind of an effort to control the content of the media and so on. And all this is characterized by hate speech, violence which is perpetrated on others through the spoken word or the written word. All this means that the concentration of power in the federation at the expense of the provinces, which has been there, and to some extent it continues to be there after the 2010 18th Amendment. That means what? Concentration of power in ethnic terms, in terms of the dichotomy between federal and provincial governments. In terms of the insiders and the outsiders, that means there are those communities which have been on the periphery. They are outsiders. Whichever regime comes into power, their status doesn't change. Among these outsiders, I have delineated in my book the religious outsiders, ethnic outsiders, sectarian outsiders. And here, for example, the Hindus in Pakistan, Christians in Pakistan, and lesser minorities, they have been subjected to what I have termed as minoritization of communities. Constitutionally speaking, they are identified as minorities. Their rights are mentioned separately in a protective way, but not as part of the mainstream. The separate electorates for some time, when they were in vogue, that we created a distance between the majority community and others from Zia onwards up to 2010, 2002, and then in some cases this distinction of belonging to the minority status continues to operate. I don't want to go into detail, but the constitutional provision for their representation in terms of reserved seats in assemblies, that means that their constituency is non-territorial. That means they don't get development expenditure like the MNAs and MPAs who are based in certain constituencies and they are elected on that basis. That doesn't apply to the reserved seats, not only of minorities but also of women. So the minorities, their representatives, they are not serving the purpose of serving their constituency, which means the religious minorities. As far as ethnic minorities are concerned, as you know, all the three major provinces, they have their population which is less than the population of Punjab. So it's a model of one province dominates all. So Punjab controls not only economic resources, political resources, the pattern of military dominance, but also it dominates demographically. That's where the ethnic tension comes in. Minorities have been struggling to get into the mainstream, move forward from their outsider status to become part and parcel of the insiders to some extent, and for some purposes they have succeeded, but they are then considered as sometimes outside the legitimate representative elite of their own provinces. So, and they are considered the center's henchmen or something. So there is this religious outsider and ethnic outsider, and there is the sectarian outsider. Shias, for example, recently there has been a clash in Kurram Agency. Before that, we know that there have been very many clashes, for example, in Gilgit-Baltistan, in some areas like Jhang district, even in Karachi. There have been killings of the sectarian minorities. In Quetta, we have heard quite a bit about the Hazaras being subjected to this kind of behavior. So these outsiders are there. The system has created this dichotomy between the insiders, where the power lies, where the legitimacy of the state lies in a way. On the other hand, there are those who belong to the periphery, and they're the ones whose culture is not represented, whose language is not represented in the mainstream politics of Pakistan, whose interests are not protected, and whose voice in terms of the presence of their representatives at the federal level remains weak, even after the emergence of the Senate as the territorial chamber from 1973 onwards. What has happened is that these kinds of patterns of outsiderization of politics has been a factor in damaging the unity, despite the fact that upholding of the cause of unity lies on the other side of this divide. So here there are those who have been, in a way, heard, their cause has been accommodated some way. Like, for example, Karachi was separated from Sindh. That led to a massive Sindhi nationalism. For after 22 years, finally, Karachi was merged back with Sindh. And of course, Bengali language, that was not recognized as the national language, along with Urdu, because there was quite a bit of opposition to that. But after a lot of damage was done to the cause of Bengali language, finally it was accepted. So that particular action was undone. One unit was put in place. Then after opposition for 15 long years, it was undone and the state took back this constitutional provision. Again, presidential system was introduced for 7 long years, from 1962 to 1969. That was in place. The whole nation stood against it during anti-Jew movement, and finally, presidential system was withdrawn. Although the certain sections of the state elite and the middle class in general continue to support the moves whereby parliamentary sovereignty is subjected to the writ of the president. This happened after the 8th Amendment and then 17th Amendment, for example, under Zautak and under Musharraf respectively. And finally, it was undone in the 18th Amendment because that meant a kind of a semi-presidential system. And Karabakh Dam, again, the Federation has continued to focus on it. It is very much on the agenda. On the other hand, the 3 provincial assemblies have passed their resolutions and have opposed it, and the Federation has continued to shy away from moving forward in the direction of building the Karabakh Dam. And of course, the quota system. Again, the Muhajir has been definitely against the quota system because it has hit it hard, but because of the fear of the Sindhi backlash, the Federation has continued to keep the quota system intact. And of course, if you remember, there was this cause of the return of Biharis from Bangladesh. Again, in the teeth of opposition of the Sindhis, the Muhajir cause of return of Biharis did not go very far. And finally, there are those outsiders who continue to be at bay. State is not willing to take back its attitude of considering the affected communities to be bona fides in terms of their identity. For example, in sectarian terms, it's the Ahmadis, and in ethnic terms, it's the Baloch, who have been alienated quite a bit in terms of security of their interest and, in fact, their life. So, ladies and gentlemen, this book, Political Conflict in Pakistan, that deals with the conflict in an overall theoretical framework of a post-colonial state. I've talked about a lack of a conflict resolution mechanism in the country, and not only in this country, but in 77 other post-colonial states which are constantly in the throes of instability, not the least because of a lingering kind of contradiction between the modern state and the traditional society, although these two poles are no more as neatly defined as they could be because they have encroached upon each other. But still, the clash of cultures, clash of identities, clash of the modern law and the customary law, and in so many other ways, this contradiction continues to be there. That's why this conflict in Pakistan is endemic to the system itself. In other words, when we talk about the cause and effect of conflict, we must not forget that it's the system itself. That is, the conflict is part and parcel of the political system of Pakistan because people adhere to contradictory sources of legitimacy in various fields of commitment, ranging from religion, ethnicity, language, to their faith. So, ladies and gentlemen, that was about the book Political Conflict in Pakistan.